Hi everyone, I'm Simon Applebaum. I'm the producer and host of Tomorrow Will Be Televised, which is the internet radio show that covers television on Blog Talk Radio, Mondays and Fridays at 3 o'clock. Lisa and David, I wanted to ask you about social media on the television set. Every TV set maker, including Samsung, is now running Facebook and Twitter on television. If you're a Fios TV customer, if you're a Uverse customer, you can also do the same. And I'm curious what both of you think about how that is going and whether that is going to become a major communication medium in this age of the customer.
I think if you go to CES and you see the smart TV apps, as I mentioned, the Consumer Electronics Show, it's amazing how much progress has been made in connected TVs in the last year, particularly. Yes, I think it's going to have a huge impact on the way you watch shows and conversations around shows all the time. You know, should it be done through the TV set? Should it be done through the brand? I think that's still evolving. So how do you get to the place of having that conversation? Of course, I'd rather that conversation's happening on, on my land, but at the same time, I also recognize there's the reach of being in other places. So it's a wide open world, but obviously, Facebook, Twitter, Netflix are on every single one of those TVs.
I assume everyone here knows what CES is by show of hands. Okay. I mentioned March 22nd.
Consumer Electronics Show.
Yes, I mentioned March 22nd. CES will be your only hint.
Another question in the back.
Ramon Ray, the man, the legend.
Just a question for smaller businesses. I know I like the young lady's example of Bravo, very interesting, and other examples, Edelman, etc. For smaller businesses, any advice that you have for those who are selling lawn chairs to dads or lawn mowers to pygmies? How do you know, should I have an app? Should I have this lawn chair spin versus a sale versus branding? I don't know if my question makes sense, but when you have smaller budgets or you're not sure where to start.
Well, first I think it's talking to your customers, you can get a lot from it. The other thing I've seen in not speaking on the app piece, but speaking in social media piece, I found small businesses do really well just presenting themselves as the expert in the field. I signed a $100,000 contract with a small business via Twitter just because we would have intellectual conversations about what their product does, but not about their product. They never tried to sell me. And when I went to go buy, I compared to all these other companies, and I still came back to the fact that, you know what? I like these guys. They know their stuff. We're on the same page. I want them on my team. So I signed a $100,000 contract with them. And I'll probably be doing it again soon.
Yeah, I think consumers are looking for ways to find products that are deeply meaningful, and I think especially with small businesses, it's often easier to do that. A recent example, one of my colleagues, one of the designers in our office recently came up with the idea for an iPhone accessory. And so what he did, he went on a website called Kickstarter that many of you probably know that's more used for not-for-profit purposes. He basically, the iPhone accessory is a tripod, is the best way to describe it. And he and his friend went there, did a really professional video, says, here's our idea, here's a prototype, we need your help, we want to raise $10,000 in 3 weeks. And I thought that was kind of nuts. And they raised $100,000 in a week and a half or so. And just imagine in the old world, he would have to go to, write a business plan, rent a suit, go to a local bank, and maybe with dad's collateral, they would get $5,000 if they're lucky. And they raised $100,000 in a weekend to basically, and all they provided was, when this product comes to market, you'll get one first. So it's the meaning that in this case is actually much more important than the tangible rational benefit.
Yeah, Kickstarter is a great platform. I have a couple examples in the book. Actually, a musician using it very effectively, but it is really most recently starting to be used by these sort of small business entrepreneurs. It's great. Another question.
I had a question. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
This is really for Lisa, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun by saying, how do you see your role and the role of Bravo changing under Comcast, if any changes at all, good, bad, or indifferent?
I'm afraid I really can't touch that one. There's just landmines all over there. So I would say I'm really looking forward to the merger, and I think they have a lot of ideas about distribution for which is that, you know, I'm not in charge of the distribution of content. That's a whole other unit. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I'll give you some insight. First of all, Steve Burke, who is taking over as CEO, is probably the best leader I've ever dealt with in my life. He's just a phenomenal guy. What I'll say has been the negative to Comcast over the years is how they run their businesses very siloed. So each area runs their own cable operations, their own service worlds, their own everything. They allow their leaders to be very artistic in the way they handle their business. It's their business. And I think that does very well for your business. And I think that having that freedom and that artistic ability will be key. I actually credit their leadership style with the success I was able to have, mainly because they said, here, go do it. Whatever you need to do, we'll support you. And so, you know, a lot of people don't understand that about Comcast, so I'll just say that publicly. I actually have been looking forward to this mainly for those reasons, and I think it will be very successful.
Hi, Wes Williams, Scripps Networks. I'm curious what longer range trends you see since things have changed so much in the past 5 to 10 years. What do you think we're going to be seeing on a panel like this in 2021? What are you keeping your eye on?
I think anything past like maybe 9 months is pretty hard to predict at this point. So I'll go out on a limb and predict maybe 9 months ahead. I think for us, you know, there's this push-pull thing, right? It's easy to talk about the trend where everything will be social, where it's going to be so easy to enter in your feedback because everyone will have 4G, it'll be easy to capture everyone's impression, and so that the collective intelligence you can get from that to be more responsive, to actually participate in a conversation with your customer and the network will definitely significantly be on the rise. But on the flip side, you know, our view is that people are at the same time going to be craving more and more direct face-to-face interaction, and so there's these counter trends of it's sort of like Facebook but FaceTime, and you know, you need to realize, especially in sort of the brand world, that while the digital side of our business is taking off, so is the brand experience side of it, right? Because you need that combination set. So as these things merge, and we've been doing some interesting things with Meetup over the last several months, as you see the convergence of some of these things. So I think you'll see a continued acceleration, but you also see the convergence in sort of a Meetup style way.
Well, you just stole my one comment I was going to say, which is the convergence of the face-to-face and the digital, and those may not be separate units within Edelman, and certainly by 2021, I'll put that as my long-term forecast, because there's a lot of exciting new technologies, things happening where you're in the store and we have these new platforms, whether it's Go Try It On, where you're asking other people for advice on how a piece of clothing looks on you before you make the purchase. You're standing in the dressing room, or you've got things where you're scanning a barcode and you're interacting with the store, with the brand, with other friends in that moment of purchase, and a lot of the things Russell was talking about. So there's going to be, I think, a blurring and a sort of merging of our digital and our face-to-face interactions will be kind of simultaneous.
I do think right now one thing that's really wild that's happening is the sort of the competitive shopping that happens in store. You know, how people will, you can, you know, pull up information on the product that you're shopping, comparison shop, see what's happening in a social context, find another place to purchase that same product. So what does that mean for the retailer and the retail experience and the value of that? I think that's really interesting and will probably accelerate as the technology of, you know, on the smartphones to recognize that, to integrate that information for you. So, you know, in some ways everything's going to be a Samsung experience in that, you know, are you going to purchase it there, or are you just going to see, feel, and then find all sorts of information? Meanwhile, the brands are going to try and do something to really pull you in. We've been doing some augmented reality kind of work against packaging and alike, and I think people trying to extend the packaging into an interactive experience in that moment with your smart device would be interesting a lot.
I know Lisa has to rush off to a meeting.
I have a meeting related to the new bosses and you don't want me to.
She's on time, we're not, no need to apologize. Thank you so much.
Thank you. David, I had a question I wanted to ask. Frank being the exception to the rule, you three are all New Yorkers, most of us are New Yorkers. Mayor Bloomberg just announced through the New York City, through Catherine Oliver, our friend Catherine Oliver, who's head of the Media Entertainment Office. They just named Rachel Stern, who's also one of our friends and a past speaker, the Chief Digital Officer for the City of New York. I guess my question is, how do you see that impacting you, your job, your work? I mean, does the city really make a difference? And is it a who cares, or is it a great thing, or somewhere in between?
As the non-New Yorker,
just so you know, we love Rachel Stern. She's a very good friend of ours.
As a non-New Yorker, I'll make a point, and I will be moving here shortly. I've just been slow at it. But anyway, what I'll say is, what happened during the snowstorm is really what drove this. This is another example of customer-driven need that had to be done. What happened during it? Obviously, people were very loud about what was going on. Newark, on the other hand, their mayor was actually twittering up a storm about it, and no pun intended, and really won the hearts not only of those in Newark, but people around the world. And that's part of the power that you see in social media. And it developed where there's now a need that had to be answered here in New York. So that's my, where it came from. It's all about the customer.
Yeah, I don't know how it's necessarily going to change the way we work, but I do think there's sort of, to your point, an interesting story here that you can't on the one hand build a reputation on responsiveness and customer service and 311s, and then on the other hand not respond to that channel. I think that's the challenge with opening yourself up to customer networks, is that the demand for responsiveness is insatiable. And once you start that dialogue, it will never stop. And you have to figure out how to not get buried under it.
One great piece of advice on that topic of responsiveness that I got from Richard Binhammer, who has been leading social media for Dell for a few years. I was talking with him, and he's quoted discussing this in the book, is that because that demand for responsiveness is so great, it used to be something happens, and if a company responds to a public issue within a week, that was acceptable. Now if you take 24 hours, you're going to be criticized. And he said, you have to understand, you're not going to solve the problem yet. You're not even going to know what the problem is before you first step forward and speak to it, okay? And that's how companies are used to. They've got to have their meeting, they've got to assess what's going on. Is this a product failure? Is it a customer failure? What was the source of the issue? And kind of develop a response. He said, you've got to be willing to get out there and say, we don't know what's happening here, but we hear you, we're looking into it, as your first response. I mean, they actually did a great job of that a few years back when there was the famous flaming laptop scenario. And there was a video posted, I think on YouTube, of somebody in Japan with their Dell laptop bursting into flames. And they jumped right on it, and they flew somebody straight out to Japan right away, a team to find out what was going on. Turned out it wasn't actually Dell's problem. It was a battery problem that affected their competitors too, other computer makers. Dell was actually the first to recall the batteries and solve it, I think. But not only that, but just the fact that they immediately said, they didn't say, oh, well, this doesn't have to do with Dell, and well, we know about that. They said, look, we're going immediately, we're gonna tell you that we're taking action, and as soon as we know something, we'll let you know.
Hi, I'm Mike Landry. I'm a producer with Charge Studios, and we're a production company that specializes in animation, stop motion, CGI, and I'm learning a lot here today about how large corporations connect with the individual customer, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for a company like ours that it's sort of the reverse, where we're a small business and our benefactors are actually the large corporations and bigger groups that hire us to produce media for them. So I'm wondering if you guys have any strategies about how a small business can sort of do that outreach with the larger corporations, because they're our customer, in a sense.
Frank, I just want to mention Ramon Ray once again. Small Business Technology Summit, March 8th at the Digital Sandbox, 55 Broad. That's where you need to be. That's where your customers are. It's true. I'm making this up. You can write me the check later.
It still comes down to the same thing. It's all about personal relationships. if your customers, in your case, it's not the big businesses, stop thinking from that perspective, are the decision makers of those businesses, are they in these spaces? And you connect with them just like you would anyone else. You connect with them on a professional basis. You talk, through it. You're able to present your own content in many different ways of showing your expertise in the space. Don't try and sell them. You try and sell them, they're going to turn you off. But if you actually try to show your expertise in the space and get involved in those conversations, you will win, and they'll look to you.
We've got time for one more question, I think, at the back of the room.
Hi, I'm Mark Hammerst. I'm a technology consultant. Do you think there's going to be a blowback from people giving up too much privacy? We had the Craigslist killer. Are we waiting for the Facebook or Twitter killer to come next? And are people going to, bundle up?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there'll be blowback, but it's going to continue to plow forward at the same time. So give people, I think increasingly we're seeing there are options where you'll be able to try and opt out of people, being able to track you and alike. And but I think that there's such an upside also to a lot of the information that's shared in terms of the mass customization that can take place, that people will be losing out on some of the benefit that they've come to expect out of their online experience. I think there will be some blowback, and then it'll keep plowing again forward. There's just too much of this massive force driving forward. I think, just to go back also to the question for a second, I've been thinking about this, the role of sort of someone leading digital in the city. I think it'll be interesting to see not just in the customer response side, but what they do in more of the getting people together to do good. There's a lot that's happened in the sort of social media for social good, and you've seen that increasingly marshaling people's sort of latent desire to have an impact, and it would just be interesting to see how much effort they focus on that side as well, because I think that there's probably quite a bit they can do.
I want to, one last question.
Yeah, all right. Very quick question, perhaps not a quick answer. Jeff Roberts, Sullivan McManus Communications. David, I'm sorry I was a little bit late if you addressed this already. But for those of us who remember the ancient history of the .com boom and bust, there was a lot of capital that went into a lot of good ideas, and 90% of it went away. What makes this development different? And is it inevitable that because of the cyclical nature of business, 90% of this will go away? And if so, who is going to survive?
I guess there's two perspectives on that. I mean, that's really a question about the tech community. The focus, I think, what we've been talking about, and my book really focuses more on, is how people are using these technologies. So I think there's a parallel question, how are businesses using them? And I think we have learned from experience, and businesses large and small want to know, what's the business impact? I'm not going to just get on Facebook and hire a bunch of people and throw away a lot of discounts so I can get to 1 million followers. What do I do with 1 million followers? What's the benefit of 1 million followers? Am I going to learn something? Am I going to gain customer insight? Am I actually going to get new product or business ideas from them? Am I going to use it as an effective sales channel, just like any other direct marketing tool? So I think businesses are very, focused now, and there is a whole section on sort of the organizational process in my book about how do you develop a strategy, and it has to start with its objectives. In terms of the startup community and the valuation of Facebook and so forth, I think, if you look at the history of finance and investment globally and in this country, it's inevitable something blows up and we learn lessons from it, and we're more skeptical until we're not, and then something else gets overvalued and it blows up. So I'm sure there'll be future bubbles and booms. I don't see right now that we're sort of poised for that in the tech sector. When I look at like the revenue coming in on Groupon and Facebook as two companies with really large valuations right now, but also really large revenue streams, I don't feel like we're kind of at that crazy point yet, but I'm sure at some point in the future